Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Senator Julia Kirt. I'm the Senate Minority Leader here in the Oklahoma State Senate. Just want to respond to the state of the state and, of course, leave lots of room for questions. I'm really proud to be joined by my caucus mates. I think the primary takeaway for me from the governor's speech is that I felt like the governor was living in a different Oklahoma, that he's not really listening to the people of Oklahoma because nothing he talked about would address our cost of living crisis we have. People not making enough money, people having a challenge getting by. Nothing he talked about would deal with the real affordability challenges we've seen. Also, when he talks about where we are as a state, I think he's ignoring some very big problems that have happened during his administration and that we're facing right now. One of the biggest being our mental health crisis. Our waiting lists are longer than they've ever been. We have a huge criminal backlog, and this is not getting better. We have a child care system that's on the brink of collapse because of a lack of contingency planning and financial planning. We have record numbers of unprepared teachers in our classrooms, adjunct teachers and emergency certified teachers. And we have almost half of Oklahomans are cost burdened by their rent. And so it is out of touch to talk about home values going up without also talking about the fact that people cannot afford their rent and many young people cannot buy in this state, and that is going to limit our economy and limit our workforce. So what I want to see is real leadership that steps into the actual problems that Oklahomans are facing instead of these empty promises that we've seen year after year that do not lead to the results we need to see for the people. Those are my primary takeaways. The other big thing is he had a lot of opportunities for state questions. And my concern is, do we actually trust the voters? I did not hear from the governor that he trusts the voters. He's sending back to the voters state questions that they wrote. Citizen petitions wrote many of those state questions to expand medical care. We wanted our health care to survive in rural Oklahoma. We want our working families to be able to access health care. That's why the people of Oklahoma expanded Medicaid, and the governor turned that program over to corporate profiteers and then is now saying that the program costs too much. So what we need to see is real leadership to make the program work and the opportunity for people to truly access the health care they deserve in our state. With that, I open it up to questions.
So, is there anything you like?
Anything I like. Just where I see agreement with the governor. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, the governor put out a couple of things last week that I thought he was going to address today. One was the asset forfeiture. Mm-hmm. He was looking at, you know, when law enforcement takes assets from someone who's being charged with a crime, making sure that that's transparent. I support that. He didn't end up talking about that in his speech, so I was concerned about that. Anyone else say anything?
Yeah, I did. Of course, hi, I'm State Senator Mary Boren. I enjoyed the shout out to Norman High. That was pretty neat. But you know, there are a lot of success stories in public schools throughout our state. And, you know, sometimes Norman, because of where we're situated, we kind of get the gold star a lot, but that's happening throughout the state. And I wish we could have heard more from how our public schools are serving kids throughout our state. The other thing that popped up with it was the OSSAA, as far as personally in agreement. That organization definitely needs to be reformed. There's very little due process. As an attorney and working in education, and I've dealt with that since 1992, since I got out of law school, it's rare that I've ever seen a situation that has been one that you could predict how to navigate that system and how to predict the outcome. It seems to be very insider baseball that's going on with a lot of those decisions. And I do agree with the governor. It shouldn't matter that a family can afford an attorney in order for their child to be able to transfer and play sports. So those were two that I agreed with. I don't know if anybody else has anything else that they agreed with, but.
Senator Kirt, he's got $17 million in his budget for consent decree and mental health. Is that enough?
You know, I think we're seeing a mental health agency that's being cut from the backside while they're trying to address the consent decree. Consent decree are folks who are already incarcerated, already assessed as needing that mental health treatment. If we're not spending money on community behavioral health and on preventing mental health crisis, we're only going to get worse. So I don't think it's enough money, because I think if you only look at one end of that funnel, you're missing the whole point, which is all the folks entering the system who are entering crisis, who are going to end up incarcerated.
The governor did not discuss the Devon merger that will take the company out of our state. Is that something you're concerned by with all the economic problems you discussed at the beginning?
About Devon moving out of state. I mean, anytime we lose a corporate entity from Oklahoma, that's a concern, and I hope that we're going to assess why they chose Houston for the headquarters. I mean, personally, my brother works for Devon, so of course I'm immediately worried that my brother's going to leave the state. So, but I think we have to look at overall our corporate environment and making sure we're not catering to any one business. And so I hope that we are looking at a broad-based economy. And we've been very reliant on a few big corporations, and I hope that we can continue to diversify those that we rely on.
There's comment on eliminating the cap on parental choice tax credit. You guys agree?
You want to do that one?
Go for it.
Yes, Senator Mark Mann, District 46. I'd be happy to address that. He also talked about diverting $12 million of state funding into childbirth investment accounts. And so when you're talking about the voucher credits and things like that, but you fail in the entire speech to mention a highly qualified teacher in every classroom, when you fail to mention funding to address some of the problems we know we have in schools, such as the reading initiative that apparently everybody but the governor's wanting to talk about, those are troubling. I didn't see anything in the speech that I found encouraging at all. I think it was full of gimmicks, and that will not solve our problem in education.
I think also when you talk about expanding the voucher credit, we're talking about $250 million. The only data we've gotten shows us that 2/3 of the families accessing that money are way above average for Oklahoma wages. And so when you talk about 2/3 of the folks accessing the tax credit are wealthier families, is that serving the purpose? We don't have any information about outcomes other than that. We don't know how people are doing. Everyone calls it a great success because the money's been given away. That is not a success in my book. We have to look deeper at quality metrics. We have to understand who's being served, and there's none of that to show us that program's worth it.
So what did you all make of his references to the tribes and singling them out as a group while claiming to not be singling them out as a group?
I mean, first of all, I'm concerned that our governor still doesn't understand tribal sovereignty and tribal citizenship. He's still conflating it with race, which is wrong. And that shows a lack of understanding for someone who leads a state that has 39 federally recognized tribes. I would hope our next governor would be aware of tribal sovereignty issues and would have a better understanding of that. We are talking about promises made to people, and this is way above his pay grade. I'm fascinated that he continues to talk about something decided by the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. We don't get to choose about that. What we do choose is how we're going to address our partnership with the tribes in this state. So are we going to continue to deflect, defer, and make it difficult? Or are we actually going to partner with one of the biggest economic engines in our state, and absolutely in rural America, one of the biggest employers?
Does it have the potential to go beyond the tribes? In other words, it starts with the tribes. But I just heard today on the way over here, for instance, like Texas A&M is eliminating its women's studies. And we've seen that some with higher ed. And, the whole DEI controversy. I may be reading too much into it.
I mean, I don't think that the governor is showing an ability to lead for all Oklahomans if he's ignoring Native Americans, and certainly his anti-DEI efforts have undermined first-time college students. They've undermined economic opportunity. They've undermined our ability to know about our health data and our health outcomes in this state. And so that choice to erase information doesn't change the facts in our state. We need to govern from a place of evidence and from a place of facts.
I want to talk about that real quick. So I want to try answering that question, bringing in DEI with relating and working with tribal sovereignty in Oklahoma. Those tribal sovereignty is based on treaties. And those treaties are very, very old, and they're older than statehood. A lot of them are. And what McGirt did was interpreting the power of a treaty that Congress never undid. So this isn't about a policy difference. This is about the state of Oklahoma respecting the power and the authority of the United States of America to enter into treaties with other sovereign bodies of people. And that is unique to Oklahoma. We have 39 tribes, and there's multiple treaties, there's multiple removal stories. And when they say, when we became Oklahoma in 1907, that was within the context of us obeying and honoring those treaties. That came as a big package. We didn't all of a sudden erase all these treaties just because we became Oklahoma. So our legislature and our governor and our state employees have a legal obligation to live as Oklahomans in honor and in adherence to those treaties. And it's the Supreme Court of the United States of America that interpreted that for us. Now, does that mean we have to be fighting all the time? Absolutely not. That's why we have compacts. That's how we have all kinds of other ways to collaborate. But unfortunately, we have spent the last 7 years fighting about something instead of figuring out how to leverage this opportunity that we have as a state in harmony with our mutual prosperity with 39 tribes in our state. So when he says DEI, he's totally overlooking the importance of the United States of America to enter into treaties with other groups of people. We had a treaty day last year, and I think it was the Muskogee Creek brought a treaty that George Washington signed. And if you do searches, you'll find treaties that are tribes that we have here in Oklahoma with Spain, Great Britain. I don't know if it was Great Britain called that back then, but we had multiple nations that our tribes back in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s were doing trade and treaty negotiating all the way back then. So when Oklahoma became a state, it was in that context. And it's very concerning to have a person that is in charge of Oklahoma to be disregarding all of that law and all of that background and all of that responsibility.
On the same topic, let's let him move on. Questions? Last question?
On the governor's call to look at medical marijuana again, he said he wants another state question on that. Obviously, there's stuff that's happened since that state question's passed. What are y'all's feeling on kind of revisiting that kind of issue?
When it comes to medical marijuana, this legislature, before our time, could have made a decision to put guardrails in place before the state question passed. Instead, they stuck their head in the sand and let that question pass and be mayhem. And it's taken a lot to try to get any kind of order around medical marijuana. So I think proactive policymaking would be a very wise idea. And I hope that we're doing that for all those state questions that could pass this year. Because what we need to think about is how we can make it better. And if the people tell us that's what they want, let's make sure we implement it correctly. So I'm not into revisiting state questions. I think we should trust the people and that we should actually implement them well.
What do you make of his comment that Oklahoma is stronger than ever, and what do you think of his kind of warnings if reversal of these policies once he's out of office?
I mean, I think I would love to see what metrics he's looking at to say we're better than ever. Because what I hear from people is that they're suffering and their state's not helping them and that their state's not addressing the real challenges that they're seeing. So, I mean, we've seen a revolving door in agency leadership. We've seen several major fiscal crises where our state leadership should be on the ball. And so we're entering a time where we've had 2 agencies tell us they might not be able to make payroll. To me, that is a deep concern that our governor needs to focus on the things that really matter to the people in Oklahoma and start there instead of being distracted by these political ideas he has and focus on good governance and making sure those actual programs are running well. Yeah, please.
And I guess the question, I'm State Senator Carrie Hicks. I represent Senate District 40 in Northwest Oklahoma City. The question I have is, for who? it raises a fundamental question about our state is stronger than ever. And I mean, obviously, he had a list of, accomplishments. And I mean, within every single one of those, in the context, that's not what I'm hearing in my community. And I'm knocking doors and I'm having one-on-one conversations with constituents that I represent every single day. And there is a deep divide in reality. You can make these wild claims, but without evidence and data to back it up, it really raises the question, for who?
Question on one of the education topics the governor brought up. Senator Hicks and I will speak on this, Senator Van, maybe as a school board member. Having charter schools be able to skip having to apply to their local school districts for approval and being able to go straight to the state board. Curious to hear your thoughts on that and your reactions to that.
So he was really critical of the OSSAA being unelected, and yet the statewide virtual charter school board are unelected bureaucrats as well. And in states that have strong, thriving public schools, they have very stringent safeguards around charter schools. And so by basically subverting the local school district where the students would be pulled from in order to attend these new charter schools, it misses some major fundamental concerns. Having those elected school boards being able to be responsive in the community, because additionally we know that many charter schools come in and go out, and come in and go out. And where do those children end up if the school folds? Back in that local school district. And so by basically subverting that local decision at the closest proximity level to their neighbors, I think it raises opportunities for a lot of corruption because there's no accountability and transparency around that process. Do you want to speak?
Well, we already have that ability. The way it currently works, and I think it's the way it should work, is if a charter wants to locate within the boundaries of a school district, they should go to that local district and try to form that partnership. I mean, if we go back to when charters were created in the 90s, the idea was to foster innovation and partner with local districts, bring that innovation in. And so in the sense that we can have that partnership, that's the way it should be. Now, the law already says if a local district declines to authorize a charter, they can go to the state charter school board, and they have. So I don't know, other than leaving out the cooperation piece, which is vital, what the governor's proposal does, other than wreak havoc and chaos.
All right, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for listening, and let's go.